All right. Sorry, everybody. Technical difficulties. I hope everybody can hear me. I'm using AirPods. Let's turn this little puppy sideways. There we go. All right. What's up, everybody? Can you hear me? Brandon, can you hear me? What's up, John Cab? Brandon? Audio's perfect. Cool, Choco. Thank you. Emma, hello, love. All right. So I sent this link over. Sorry, guys. YouTube is being super difficult. So I switched over to StreamYard. Not ideal, but it works. Perfect. All right. Make sure that we got that link. See, this is what's good about the fact that I can just all right. Sorry, guys. I had to switch over to StreamYard. Now we're just going to wait. How's everybody doing? Hopefully, our guest arrives here soon. Is there audio or is there no audio? Mikey, what's up, buddy? Can you guys hear me? Bella, what's up? Sound is good. Perfect. All right. So now we're just waiting. I had to do it through StreamYard, so I'm sure Mooch has to probably go in and maybe, I don't know, make a StreamYard account or something real fast. I tried to do it through YouTube. YouTube is garbage when you're going live. Sounds muffled. Well, what is it? What's up, James? Dream Chasers, East Texas. What's good? All right, man. What's up, buddy? When do you want to come on here? Tell us a couple of fun stories. I'm sure you have a lot. Put this little tobacco pouch in there, and now your boy don't smoke. All right, let me go check on Mooch. I'll be right back, guys. Still waiting. As you guys can tell, I got some ear pods, knockoff from China, through the Temu app for $20. They register uh, as AirPods. It's the craziest thing. Yes, those are the ones right there. Bro, they've helped. They've definitely helped. They sound kind of weird. Is it a better or worse? Okay, I'll take these damn things out right now. Okay. Well, stop connecting, you stupid pieces of junk. Who wants to type in how you turn AirPods off? Oh, I know. Put them back in their case. All right, how's that, guys? Is that much better? Perfect. That's how we'll roll then. Turn my Bluetooth off. Perfect. All right. Because somebody was saying, hey, man, his audio is garbage, whatever mic he's using. And I'm like, what mic? I don't use a microphone. I put my telephone up here. All right. Let me go check on Mooch again, guys. Nope, I caught it. I caught it. It tried to turn my mic off. I caught it. Everybody don't tell me. See, the audio is good. And the camera's perfect too, bro. I don't know. All these people are like, oh, you got to get, this $900 camera and this $400 microphone. I'm like, do I? I got this puppy right here. And the camera's fine. Watching from Iraq. Damn. Salute to you and whatever you're doing in Iraq. It's pretty wild. Did you guys see what I'm doing with the t-shirt? Hit your boy's Cash App with them $2. We're giving that puppy away. I'm going to do it on the 21st. Like I do everything on the 21st. Jen P is going to be a very happy camper for this month. Ooh, Jen P. Ooh, girl. We did the damn thing, Jen. Sunset, hello. Mark, what's good? Exactly. That's what I'm saying too. Like what I got going on, it works pretty well. Just try and do it like we do in our videos. Since I already moved everything around. That should be perfect. Anacrime. Oh boy. I used to go, I lived out there in Orange County. And we used to go to the Angels games. It's a pretty fun time. I mean, the Angels weren't very good at the time. But the park was cool. Going to the ball games. That's all fun. I am going to try my hardest, Emma. I don't think Jen. I don't know. We'll find out. Yes, trying to go global. Trying my best. Let's go check on the Mooch one more time. Uh-oh. All right. All right, boys.
Oh yeah, I made it.
There we go. There we go. Where there's a will, there's a way, huh?
Sorry about that, man.
Hey, no worries. No worries at all, brother. We'll figure it out. So, how's your night going, man?
Pretty good, pretty good. I haven't really been doing much, so it's been pretty chill.
Yeah. How's this YouTube thing? You liking it?
Yeah, it's been cool, man. It's been pretty fun so far. I just kind of like for my own channel, I just kind of do it, when I want to, when I'm in the mood or whatever. So not a lot of pressure. It's been really chill. I haven't been able to make new content in a while just because I've been on other channels and been, trying to promote that. But it's been mellow. It's been fun. The feedback's been good. So
Yeah, you've been doing awesome. And that's the way I do it. I just kind of make the videos whenever it's time to make them. I don't put any kind of time constraints on myself at all.
Right. Is this live or are we recording?
This is live, and then I'll just put it on my members page, and I'll chop it up, take anything that doesn't need to be in there out of it, and I'll put it out in like 2 parts or something like that.
Oh, so it's not live edits and it's not being broadcast anywhere right now?
It's broadcast live.
Oh, okay.
But then nobody will be able to rewatch it once we're done with it. So.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Until we put it back out there.
Right.
Yeah. It gives the biggest thing about YouTube is letting everybody, involvement. You want people to be involved in everything kind of that you're doing.
Right, for sure.
So tell us about yourself, brother.
Man, I don't know where to start. So, like I said, I've done some of these shows before, so some of my other viewers probably already know, but I grew up, wrestling and playing a lot of sports. I got into the punk rock and skinhead scene. I ended up being in a band called The Escaped, and we traveled for about 5 years, played all over the country. We played like CBGBs and Gilman Street and some Warped Tours. So I did a lot with that. And then from that, I got into motorcycles and started riding a ton. Hung out with some clubs in Oregon, and then I moved to Nevada and ended up linking up with the Vagos, and I was with them for just under 2 years. And then I ended up joining the Mongols, and I ended up being in the Mongols for just shy of 15 years. I left about a year ago.
Man. So let's start. You say back in the skinhead scene, but it wasn't like there's different types of skinheads, right?
Yeah. So, for people that don't know that, traditional skinhead scene was almost equivalent to like the punk rock scene, and the fact that it was just about music and fashion. That came up in the 60s, especially, England, Jamaica, big West Indian influence from Jamaica, but mainly in England. And then, in the 80s, it got really publicized, and, the media took over it, and it really got affiliated with the right wing and politics. But the early form of that traditional version is just a movement of, music and fashion. And so, there's a big culture of traditional skinheads that aren't really political. And then, the side we were on we were anti-racist because we fought with a lot of the neo-Nazi skinheads, but they weren't necessarily even in the same subculture as us, man. These guys were strictly in it for politics. They're in it, to push their racist beliefs, where we were going to concerts and definitely into the music and the scene. So it was more just to keep them out of our scene than anything that, when it first started anyways.
Right. And that's what people don't understand. It's a lot of it's about the music and the shoes and, they don't understand. They just hear this movement and they think negative right away.
Right. And it's very similar to biker culture too, right? Like the media gets a hold of it and they do their spin, and then the public believes what they believe off of what they heard from the media. And just like, how 1%ers and bikers are all these bad dudes and do all this illegal stuff and mafia on wheels and all the stuff that the media says, same thing happened with skinheads. So there's a really strong parallel between the two, depending on how they were portrayed in the media and then how the public kind of ate it up.
Right. So what area of the country was this all in growing up?
I grew up in Salem, Oregon, just outside of Portland. And then after high school, I moved to Portland. Okay. So I spent most of the time there. I did live like I said, I moved to Carson City for a while. And then I also, when I was a Mongol, I lived in San Diego for a while. And then I did my undergrad at Whittier College. So I lived in Whittier, east of Los Angeles for a while as well.
Yeah. So LA's a different scene. I lived out there for about 2 years. And I worked in Azusa. I ran a bar called Callahan's out there.
Nice.
And the group, it was basically a biker bar, and the Vagos would show up and the Mongols would show up sometimes,
Yep. Yeah, that
And
area for sure.
they're two completely different types of groups, at least in that area.
Right.
The Vagos a little more rowdy, a little more, you know, I, they were out there to party, as to where the Mongols, they were there to enjoy themselves. It was just a different scene. So, at what age did you join the Vagos?
I was about 25 when I first started hanging around clubs, and yeah, I was about 25 when I joined the Vagos because I joined the Mongols at 27.
Okay. And how did that go? How did it go? You leave one club, you go over to another club. Was there any fallout for that? Was there any animosity?
Yeah, definitely. There was quite a bit. I think, from some of these shows I've been doing and reading some of the comments and stuff, I think a lot of people from outside of our culture or our scene don't understand how relatively common it is, for guys to patch over. I know the Vagos are a much bigger club now and they wear a 1% diamond now and stuff, but this was 2005. They were definitely on the come up. They were growing. And I'm not saying they weren't like big or well respected or anything like that. They just weren't, on a national scale that they are now. And within the 15 years I spent in the Mongols, I'd say at least 2 dozen, if not more, Vagos had patched over the years. So, although not like super common, it wasn't crazy either. I came in a time. I probably wouldn't have been able to come in under Little Dave or any of the other leadership. I came in a time under Doc, and Doc was in this like heavy recruiting drive. And I hate to say it because it's not a good look, but it was essentially taking most people. And so I came in under that. Usually for years, the Mongols and Vagos have an agreement where they won't take each other's members. I'm sure they probably still do. There's just been certain windows and certain doors from time to time where it's either negotiated or it's not. When I came in, it was not negotiated, and it didn't go smooth. I'm great with that. I'm cool with that club now, and I have friends in it. But it wasn't a smooth transition. When I did it too, there was a handful of us in Oregon that did it together, and there was a couple of us in Carson and Vegas that did it as well, and then eventually the whole chapter from Redding, California too. So it wasn't just like one or two of us going. There was close to a dozen of us. So you can imagine how the Vagos felt about that. It was obviously, it wasn't meant as disrespect, but it was definitely a disrespectful move, and that's how it went.
Absolutely. And the thing is, you joined the club, and you just, over the years, you either see things that just rub you the wrong way, or it's just not for you. But you still, the club life's for you. Just the club wasn't.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, when I started coming around clubs, I didn't know anything about clubs, man. So when I was hanging out with I hung out with an old school club called the Outsiders in Portland initially. And they're, very cool, very well respected old school club. And they taught me a lot about like club tradition and protocol and all the stuff that was well above my head from the skinhead world. But, that was one of those things where I noticed that the only thing I really had in common with these guys was motorcycles. Like we weren't from the same generation. Culturally, things were super different. And so I really got swept up in the Vagos because when I was in Nevada, I met a lot of Vagos that were like skateboarders and into punk rock. And, it was just, more clean cut and didn't have the long hair. And, it was just a way different culture. And, being an impulsive young kid, I jumped in without really hanging around long enough to see the politics and what the club was really all about. So when I did move, like you were saying, I think, if you're really into that lifestyle or that culture, there's a home for everybody. And a lot of the times it's regional, right? Or geographical, like depending on who the big club is in your area or your region. But with the Mongols, I found my home, so, I hear the club hopper stuff or this and that, but man, I was with the Mongols for 15 years. So,
Yeah.
did I, was it a smooth move to leave the Vagos? No, it was pretty disrespectful to them, and I own up to that. But then I found my home, and the things I learned in the Vagos and with the other clubs is what helped me be a successful member in the Mongols, and why I was a long lasting member in the Mongols as well. So can't necessarily say I regret it either.
So let's talk about the time in the Mongols. 15 years, man, that's a long time. I bet you made a lot of friends over the years.
I did, man. I think I've been really blessed with the fact that I've been pretty good at networking, and so I'm really good at like staying in touch with people, meeting people. So as things progressed and I got into national leadership and stuff, I was the one that did a lot of the sit downs with a lot of the other major clubs. I had a lot of friends in a lot of the other clubs, so I was really opening up communication with clubs, around the country. And then, like I said, I moved a little bit. So when I moved around, I started some new chapters. So, in Oregon, I started the very first chapter of the Mongols in Oregon, me, my brother, and some of the other guys. And almost every chapter that was started in Oregon or Washington was either started by me and my brother or someone that we brought into the club. Then same thing with those Reading Vagos. So I brought them with me to Mongols. And so, we ended up starting that Shasta County chapter there. When I lived in California, I helped start the Fullerton chapter. And then I moved out here to the Midwest in 2017 and started several chapters in Missouri, Indiana, and Illinois too. So, I spent a lot of time in the club staying busy and staying active. And by being out and being active, you meet people, man. And when you meet people, eventually people want to join, or if they like what you got going on or the group that they see, just attracts the right people. And then growth is natural after that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned Vegas. So Vegas always had, well, I can't say always. When I was growing up, the Vagos were there. The Mongols were obviously in Henderson. But the scene wasn't really big for the Vagos or the Mongols. Now it's basically a Vago town with how everything's played out.
Yeah, and there's a lot of Mongols there now too. But you're right.
Yes.
When I joined the Mongols, there was just the Henderson guys there, and there was only a handful of them.
Yeah.
So that was 2007. Since then, they've grown quite a bit, and they have several chapters there. But even when I was a Vago, the Vagos did a lot of national runs there because their national P at the time was into gambling and went to a lot of casinos and stuff. But it was still dominated by Bandits, Angels, and other clubs.
Yeah. So you joined the Mongols obviously after Laughlin, right?
Yeah. I joined in 2007. It's about 5 years after.
Okay. All right. Let's see. So you were with the Vagos 05 to 07, right?
Yeah.
05, 07?
Yeah, it was just shy of 2 years.
So what made you leave the Mongols finally after 15 years?
There was a few things that played into it. Part of it was just, I think this culture is changing, man. The culture is shifting. A lot of the not just the politics, but the type of people that are joining clubs. And I've always ran like a really regimented, strict, structured program, and I found myself really fighting to do this program that I was used to, and a lot of the membership or the younger membership wasn't necessarily into it, and I was really starting to kind of have this deep thought with myself of, am I doing this for me or what's best for the club? Is it what I'm comfortable with because it's what I was taught, or is it, what's best for the membership? And I really started to feel like the membership didn't really want that rigid structure that I used to have. Around this time as well, politics were getting kind of heavy. There was some other stuff going in that I don't really want to get into, but I'm sure everyone has seen it on the internet and stuff like that. So that was kind of burning me out as well. And then really, man, it just got to the point where, we were kind of going at it with another club here. Things were just, I don't know. It just became where, like I said, I felt like the way that I wanted to be a member and the type of member I wanted to be was no longer the popular opinion. And it was no longer the type of member that the majority of the new membership was. And I say that respectfully with the people in there. It's just, I was having a hard time grasping the generational change and the leadership change. Those are really, really big parts of it for sure.
Well, the leadership change. So you come in under Doc, right?
Yes.
And then at the time, I mean, people say it different ways, but so they're bringing in, a lot of Southsiders, things like that, who don't ride bikes, right?
Initially, yeah, man. I mean, I really would love to tell you that was myth and rumor, but one thing that brought me into the motorcycle scene was motorcycles. I love riding motorcycles. And so when I meet new members or new people, one of my first questions is, hey, what kind of bike do you ride? And in that era, I was pretty disappointed when people would, some people would say I don't ride. A lot of people still did, but there was definitely members that were joining that didn't.
Yeah. And then Doc does what he does.
Right.
And sells the club out basically.
Yeah, 100%.
To get himself out of his own mess that he's made. How did that go? How did, what was it like being in the Mongols at the time when Doc blew the club up, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I came in at the tail end of it. So Doc stepped down at like late 07, early 08, and it was probably early 08, and I joined in 2007. And so early on, my first year in the Mongols was pretty tumultuous, and within a few months, I'd been arrested for, I was charged with attempted kidnapping for following these federal agents down the road. I didn't know they were federal agents. So I fought that case and I took it to a jury trial and I beat it. But one of the things, I was found guilty of a misdemeanor, and part of that, they put me on non-association probation. So every single time I got caught hanging out at the club, I'd go back for a month or two. And I ended up doing about a year on and off, just going back and forth, because I kept being active in the club. So some of that politics stuff, honestly, was missing, because I was like, a lot of those runs or meetings, I was either in jail or trying to avoid going to jail. So that first year was kind of hit and miss for me. And that's when a lot of that stuff happened. That's when, once I kept getting busted for the non-association, I figured, well, I wasn't going to step away from the club. So I moved to San Diego. I figured, that was the best place for me to learn truly, what it was like being a Mongol, learn the old ways, learn the program I wanted to learn. And so I moved to San Diego, and within, I don't know, 6 months of being in San Diego, Operation Black Rain hit, and my whole chapter got decimated. There was 2 of us left. So I ended up coming back to Oregon, turning myself in, doing a couple more months, and then started Portland and Salem chapters and some other stuff in Oregon. So that first year, man, it was pretty tough, and there was so much different stuff going on. It was really hard for me to pay attention to the politics. I was a new member anyways, so a lot of it was above my pay grade and above my head. But there was just so much stuff going on.
Right. But finally, you had risen through and become the P of your chapter, right?
Yeah, I started out as the P of my chapter in Oregon. I was a regular member in San Diego. I'd been in a few different positions when I lived in California. And then in 2011, I got brought into the club's mother chapter, which is like our national leadership, and developed a program called the State Rep Program, where we had regional reps for different areas, because the club was getting quite a bit bigger, and we had to focus on, what we were going to change as far as leadership goes and how we were going to stay organized. So then I was a regional representative for the whole time I was in the club for different regions, helped oversee out of state. I helped start Australia chapter. I used to oversee some of the European chapters and stuff like that. So yeah, I ended up having quite a bit on my plate.
The European chapters for all of the clubs. That's a wild bunch right there.
Man, once they kind of put that on my plate, I ended up shutting a lot of it down. The more I looked into them and found out who they were, and a lot of them had bounced around from club to club, and not in the way like I was doing. It was more for financial gain and in different purposes. And it really didn't fit what the Mongols were about, or at least at the time what the Mongols were about. They were really spread out. They weren't like they couldn't really hold down an area, in my opinion. And it ended up being more headache than it was worth. And we ended up shutting down a lot of those chapters.
Right. So the threat, being in a motorcycle club, the threat's always on about getting caught up in a RICO. And you see it time and time again. Like you said, okay, the feds were watching you and you followed them and had to go back on a violation for whatever they had thrown onto your plate. But like, that's got to be a nervous life too. 15 years of basically, you can't even trust half the guys that you're around, much less anybody else.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's a trip. And when we sign up for this, we kind of know what we're signing up for. But part of it's, especially as a youngster, we're all pretty naive to a lot of this stuff. Like when I first joined a club, I had read, a lot of books. I knew about Under the Loan and, these ATF agents that infiltrated, but I didn't know a thing about confidential informants and that whole program. And, as it turned out, as since Doc grew so quickly, there were so many people in the club that were confidential informants. And there was 2 in Oregon at the time. And I remember these were guys that were doing dope, and we were sending to rehab and trying to get back on their feet. So it was the last thing I ever thought that, they were telling on people. And here they were getting paid, $3-4 grand a month to be informants. So that was something I was super naive to that I learned through the years. And it definitely makes it, hard to trust people. And I don't mean as far as like, oh, we're doing illegal shit, so we got to be careful who we talk to. It's just in general, trust in general. And I know a lot of those informants that I was around in the early days, they would just make stuff up. They wanted to justify their paychecks. I have so many different examples of times that we're making things up. So the trust level is just even like who you're standing near or who you're around in general. That gets pretty tiresome. That can definitely burn a person out.
Man. So you finally leave. You decide this isn't for me anymore. I'm going to step away from the club. How did that go?
Initially, it went pretty well. So I left in good standings at first, and I was allowed. So if you've been in the club for more than 10 years, you're allowed to leave in good standings. So I was retired in good standings. The issues came when a member of the chapter I was in out here in Southern Illinois, he had gotten in a fight with some outlaws, and the outlaws pressed charge. The two members of the member of the outlaw pressed charges against him, and so he had to take a plea bargain because this outlaw said that signed a witness statement saying he would take this to trial, and part of his plea bargain was non-association probation. So he was going to have to take a step away from the club. He had a 2-year suspended sentence. So if he got caught violating, he'd go to prison for 2 years. Well, his blood brother was in the chapter. His roommate was in the chapter. This whole chapter I built here in Southern Illinois was very tight knit and very small. So everyone kind of took a step down at the same time. And because they didn't have the time in, they were put out in bad standing. So, the club had come to me and said, hey, you're in good standings, but just so you know, if you get caught hanging out with these guys, you're going to be out bad. So I was just very upfront and said, these are some guys I'm really tight with. These are my brothers. And, if that makes me out bad, I guess that's the way it's going to be. And I ended up, I took my status on the chin because it is what it is. But I chose to stay loyal to these dudes out here. So,
yeah. So have you thought about starting your own social riders club, not a 1% club, just something for the motorcycle aspect of it?
Yeah, we have a thing. We have a thing going. We call it Lift, Train, Ride, which isn't like the name of a club or anything, but it's just a movement that we put together where, all of us, since we all left at the same time, the same group I was talking about, we all decided to stick together. And we follow a lot of the same format that we followed when we were in the motorcycle club, but just kind of tweaked it to things that were relevant or not relevant once you're not in club life, right? So we got rid of the politics and stuff like that, but we still keep a lot of the structure and bylaws, and some of those structures are, everyone has to work out 3 days a week. Most of the guys train jujitsu or stick and knife fighting or, some sort of martial art, and then riding, so once a week, everyone has to get together to either ride or train together. A lot of times we're working out together. Me and a couple of guys do jujitsu together. So the focus really shifted to just the brotherhood aspect, being on our bikes and having fun. And he got rid of all the politics and the drama that comes with it.
Right. And Live, Train, Ride is open.
Yeah. So anyone could get the Lift, Train, Ride t-shirts and patches and stickers. And, what I always suggest for everyone that's into it is, pick that stuff up and then tag yourself on social media, living the lifestyle, riding bikes and lifting weights and stuff like that. The core group of us wear the symbol that I have on my shirt. And that's not open to anybody. That's just our core group. And that's essentially, it's like the club part of Lift, Train, Ride, but we don't have a name. We're not even calling it a club. I just say it for lack of a better term to explain it, but we're not claiming areas or we're not, wearing other patches or anything that's going to define ourselves or look like traditional motorcycle club. But we are, we do kind of have a uniform and we ride together and work out together and spend a lot of time with each other.
Right. So there's one guy that I found out lives in Vegas that you've taken a real disliking to, the Mighty Mouse. Right?
I don't think I know who that is.
Oh, I think somebody was saying that maybe it wasn't you then. Somebody had said that they had heard that you were calling out this guy, Mighty Mouse, who, I don't know, has been all over the internet, and the guy's got scumbag charges or something like that. I could have sworn that they said it was you. I was like, oh, geez, I got to ask him about it.
Yeah, no, it wasn't me. Honestly, man, I try and stay off of the negative stuff, especially on social media and the comment section. Every now and again, I'll reply if I can reply in a positive manner, even if it's a negative message. And I only do that if it's to clear up something, right? If someone has the wrong impression. But if it's just someone saying they don't like me or doesn't like what we're doing, or, hey, that dude's out bad and this and that, I just kind of let it go. But I try and keep things positive. I've always been in that mindset of lead by example. And I'm trying to be a positive influence on this world and those around me. And so I really don't like getting wrapped up in that negative back and forth internet tough guy stuff.
Good. And it'll come too. People just come out of the woodworks. Once you start doing YouTube, it's the craziest thing in the world. And they'll say any type of thing that they want to.
It's pretty wild, man. I've seen, I've already been getting some of it. And the part that I guess gets frustrating is a lot of these are guys that aren't from the club life, but they try and talk like they're experts, right? Like we were saying before, the ones that, there's no way that you went from a Bago to a Mongol. Well, it happened, you know what I mean? But these outside perspectives or, these people think they're experts on a life that they didn't live. Those are the ones that it's hard not to engage with. But honestly, man, it's better for my mental health and everyone else if we just don't engage. And listen, if at the end of the day that makes them feel good by being some random nobody that hops on and has to badmouth someone on the internet, I guess it's making them feel better, good for them. So, who am I to ruin their day for that one?
Right. So during your time in the Mongols, you guys obviously you lost Taco, right?
That was Tacos and Outlaws.
Oh, that's right. My bad.
You're good.
uh,
I went to that funeral though.
Little Dave.
Yeah.
You guys lost Little Dave. How do you feel about Little Dave with what happened with him?
So, me and Little Dave obviously were in the same chapter for a long time. So we were pretty close. But it was more at the time, just to be upfront, me and Dave are friends now. At the time, it was more of just, we were brothers in the club and we worked together, but as far as like with leadership stuff, but we weren't like, I was excited to see him at runs and stuff, but I'd never been to his house or been in his car or, really met his family. And when all that stuff first came down, I didn't want to just be blindly loyal and just assume that it wasn't true. So, and at the time I was still active in the club and he was out bad, so I wasn't allowed to talk to him. So I honored that. And I just kind of was waiting for things to come out, waiting for more proof, for more evidence. And honestly, the proof never came. And I did, I went on Insane Throttle and I didn't go on there to defend Dave. I went on there to defend the process of labeling someone a snitch or a rat. I think it's getting all too common in the motorcycle club scene, and without paperwork, I don't think anybody should be doing it. So, I think the people that had their minds made up about Dave one way or another, it's not going to change, right? They wanted to believe it and they believed it. From everything I've seen, and between that whole trial that went on and everything, man, I don't see any proof of it. I'm not saying that the dude was a perfect leader or that, that he pleased everyone or made every right move. But I definitely don't think he was a rat or deserved what he had coming to him. And like I said, because I like to lead by example, I posted some pictures with them. I've been pretty open about our friendship because I want to show, here, everyone always talks about loyalty and honor. And then people jump ship when things aren't convenient or, people are, or it's a bad look or people are talking shit. But, I wanted to show what loyalty looks like. And so I've been ever since I could prove that Dave wasn't a rat, I've stayed tight with Dave. And I support Dave and I defend Dave, but not just because we're friends, but because of the facts.
Right. So when that all happens too, because I've seen, it just seems like a trend with not the Mongols or Vago, just all the clubs. They're pushing out all the old school guys. And then they label them bad. And then they, they'll say, oh, he's a snitch or a rat. And it's just so common now. And I think the clubs have just gone in such a weird direction now. It's not even like it was 15 years ago.
It's a huge generational shift just from from the time I was in. And I think the unfortunate part of the frustrating part is, the term out bad used to be reserved for people that were legit snitches or messed around with the brother's old lady or stole from somebody, but like the legit lowlifes of the club world, right? That's what that whole term out bad was. And then, different clubs, I can't speak for other clubs, but for Mongols, after Black Rain and a lot of dudes had dropped their patch and stuff, then they started saying, okay, if you left without the 10 years in, you're automatically out bad. And it just kept watering down what out bad meant. And then, then there's guys like my guys that the guy was out bad because he was fighting a case against another club after, that he was doing while he was a Mongol against, so I don't want to get into it, but you know what I'm saying? Sorry, I'm just trying to mince words on that one, but
yeah.
But, my point is, he's out bad, but he never did anything negative against the club. And because I stayed loyal to him, I'm out bad. So the frustrating part is just that, that they throw that label out there and it's a tarnishing label. And the frustrating part is, guys like Dave or I, and even Doc before he turned out to, do all the super negative things he did, had made some positive changes in the club, man. And you changed the status to out bad. And it's almost sad to see the work you put in pretty much erased.
Right. And they use that to keep other current members from talking and figuring things out. It's a big tool.
That's a big part. That's a big part of it for sure.
So this is all pretty fresh for you, right? Because you've only walked away from the club, like a year ago, right?
Yeah, it's been a year and a couple months.
Is it almost relieving to be out?
Honestly, it's been pretty nice, man. I hate to say that because I think it sounds almost disrespectful, and it's not. I love the time I spent with the Mongols. I wouldn't change it for for the world. It was such a great experience, and some of my best friends and brothers came from that club and in those relationships. But after being as active as I was for as long as I was, it's been nice to just chill and do me and focus on, stuff I want to do, and, not be gone every single weekend and traveling or taking on, other people's stress and the stress of dealing with other clubs. And it's been nice, man. And on top of that, I've been able to do stuff I couldn't have done in the club, like my YouTube channel, and I'm writing a book, and, there's different stuff I could do that I wouldn't have been allowed to do as an active member. So it's been a blessing. But you know what? It's also, I've been very, very blessed with the fact that I had a tight group of guys that left with me. What I see in this world a lot is that people that leave or get pushed out, and then they feel like they have nobody because they went from having tons of friends and brothers and people always there to them, and then all of a sudden they don't. And I didn't have to go through that. So between my jiu-jitsu team and, people I knew from the punk rock and skinhead world, and then the guys that stuck with me, I've still had so many friends in my life and brothers that it didn't leave a big hole.
Well, that's good. That's really good, because I've talked to quite a few ex-motorcycle club members, and for some of them, it's like one day this is your life and it all changes. You get politicked on, or you do something stupid, or whatever the reason. Now you are no longer a part of it, and you just wake up the next day like, well, now what?
Right.
So at least you had, good friends that came along with you, and now you have, you have sort of a program still.
Yeah, it definitely fills that void. And then, obviously working out and jujitsu and like all these other aspects of my life kind of have a focus as well. So I'm not just like sitting around wondering what things were like or missing things, so I still have a direction. And I think that's helped a ton as well. Like I tell a lot of people when I talk about the book I'm writing, because I'll be the first to say that I've always said that, I don't like when club guys write books, like their tell-alls and book stuff, because to me, I've always felt like that's profiting off of the patch. There's guys that'll say, if the only thing in their title is the name of the club is such and such member, people are buying it because the name of the club. But what I would say and it's not just me, there's a lot of people like this, but the club was just part of my story. Being a member is just part of my story. There's so many other aspects, like I said, growing up in the punk rock and skinhead world is a big part of my book. And, I became a social worker and a mental health therapist, and I work with kids that are on parole and probation. And so there's so many other pieces to my story that I'm not just selling, hey, this is me because I was a Mongol. That's just a part of my story.
Right. So how do you get into doing something like that? The mentoring,
Yeah, I have a master's degree in social work. So when I was going in and out of jail for those probation violations, I was obviously pretty burnt out on jail, right? And I was trying to figure out like what I wanted to do with my life. And there's a member of the Mongols, Richie Rich, who's got his PhD in clinical psychology. And the dude's all blasted in tattoos, and he's a really well-known member. And I remember thinking, well, that's really cool, man. And if he can do that, maybe I could do that. So I started with my 2-year certificate in drug and alcohol counseling. Really fell in love with psychology. So I spent 4 more years getting my bachelor's degree in psychology, and then 2 more years of my master's doing social work. So I went to school for 8 years, and that's how I make my money. That's my career now.
What do you think would happen if a vast majority of the Outbad members from all the clubs decided to get together and start their own club?
Man, I don't know. So that's a tough one, right? Because it depends, are they out bad for legitimate reasons or because of politics? Or, there's, I wouldn't want to be affiliated with people that, that were out bad because they told on other people or stole from people.
Obviously,
but as far as like the, people that are out during political stuff, I'm sure we all have a lot in common. And even as an active member, that was something I used to say is, when I was in the skinhead scene, I knew a lot of guys from like the Bay Area that were into the punk rock and hardcore scene that ended up joining the Angels because of where they were from. Right. And then, guys on the East Coast that joined the Outlaws, we all came from the same scene, and they just joined whatever club was in their region. So many of us have so much in common, man. And the only thing different is what patch we picked up. And a lot of that was because of someone we knew in the club or what area we're in. But it doesn't, the enemy thing, goes deep once you're in the club and things happen, but just on surface level, we all have so much in common.
Right. And that's another thing. Like you have your natural clubs that it's like Tom and Jerry. They're just on top of each other as soon as they see each other. Right. And that's a hard way to live too. Like you go to the grocery store and you're in the club and you see, ex clubs, club member in there wearing his cut. And then all of a sudden you're fighting in the middle of a grocery store.
Yeah, I mean, you've always got to be ready, and that's kind of what we talked about before about the law enforcement stuff too. You know, if you're going to join a major club, you need to know what area you're in, what other clubs are in that area, and then really need to know what comes with it, because that's definitely part of the risk and the stress. And you know, win or lose, it's still stress, right? So it's still something that weighs on you and tires you out. And you know, like when I lived in San Diego, man, we couldn't go to a bar without, you know, 4 guys in a chase vehicle and back up, and couldn't be at the bar for very long. Like, it kind of took the fun out of going out, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, at the time I was a young kid and I know what I signed up for, but thinking back, bigger picture, you know, people, I think a lot of people jump in without realizing this until they're doing it. And it's something that the general public doesn't quite acknowledge or recognize either, but just the stress level of how things can change any minute. Man, it's pretty wearing. And over the years, it definitely can get old.
All right. Did you have any CIs that in your chapter?
In Oregon, when we first started, there were 2. Like I said, that was before I kind of knew what the CI thing was. Looking back, there were some pretty obvious red flags, but you know, I just kept telling myself, well, I know these guys aren't feds. I know they're not actual cops. Like, they were doing dope and, you know, doing dumb shit. But, you know, looking back, they were the ones instigating issues with the other clubs in our area. And they were the ones trying to instigate illegal activity. And I think those red flags would be obvious now, but, you know, as a 25-year-old kid that's brand new to the club life, it was hard for me to spot.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the biggest worry for me. If I was in a club, like, there's so much going on. There's so much. The feds are just so deep in everything.
And I think the frustrating part is, you know, on the surface level, when I first joined, I was like, I don't care, because I know that I don't do illegal stuff. You know what I mean? You could look in my free agency. I don't make any money. You know, I'm a social worker. You know, I've always kind of lived paycheck to paycheck. But the caveat to that is, you know, you could get caught for defending yourself or your brothers in a bar. You could get busted or caught up just because you're in leadership. And that's, I think that's another part that I think gets overlooked is, you know, the Sons of Anarchy generation and all these guys want to be president, want to have the flash that says they're in leadership, but they don't really understand what comes with being in leadership. And part of those things is you could get busted just for things that guys underneath you did, because they might think it was done by at your direction. So there's just so much that goes into it that I don't think, unless you've lived the life, people don't know.
Yeah. Pee Wee from the Hells Angels, he walks out. The Mongols are walking into the wedding chapel as they're leaving. It was his son's wedding.
Yeah, I know the story.
He looks at his guys and says, well, I guess we got to do what we got to do, and takes off on the Mongol. They called that coercion. Just him simply stating, well, we know what we got to do.
Yeah.
Coercion. That's a 4-year sentence just for saying that.
Yeah, and the crazy part now is these informants could bring it up and you can just nod your head or something simple and you're getting busted too. You know, I mean, there was guys during Black Rain where an informant would call and ask him where to get dope. And I remember one of the guys said, hey, I don't do that shit, but you might want to check with so-and-so. And then he got facilitating a drug deal and he was on the phone. He got 5 years for it. So it's like, here, things that you would think aren't illegal because it's not a big deal, we're getting people jammed up just because of the patch you wear.
Right. Are there any times that you saw in the Mongols where they obviously it was a political move and they just pushed somebody out that had been in for decades? Like, I've heard about it in other clubs, but the Mongols, you're the first Mongol or former Mongol that I've talked to.
Right. That one's tough to say, man. I mean, there's definitely people that have ended up, you know, when I first joined the club, the best advice I got was to stay out of the politics. Stay out of politics because yeah, on paper, we can definitely say I've seen people pushed out because they disagreed with leadership. But those same people, a lot of times, once they disagreed with leadership, would break certain rules or talk behind brothers' back or stir the pot and go about things the wrong way as well. So then it depends, I guess, if we want to nitpick what they really got thrown out for. But I mean, yeah, dissenting against leadership is always going to be a slippery slope. And a lot of times it's going to end up with getting kicked out for sure.
Yeah. So you're writing a book.
Yeah, I'm writing a book, and like I said, you know, the Mongols is part of my story, but you know, there's a lot of it just about me and my life. You know, I'm an identical twin brother. You know, like I said, I grew up in the punk rock and skinhead scene, and then band and touring, and then did the motorcycle stuff, and then really got into jujitsu pretty heavy, and then you know, I'm a social worker, so it's just a general overview of my life so far, and just kind of the ride I've been on.
Nice. So I see somebody keeps asking in the comments about LD being put out. Is that something you can comment on?
I mean, that's little Dave. And I think,
okay.
I think everyone kind of, you know, that's been covered so much on the internet. I think everyone has a general opinion or idea on that. As far as the politics of it, it's not something I will get into. But like I said, man, the biggest takeaway is it was a very unfortunate thing. That video came out, and you can read into that whatever you want. And I think a lot of people made that first. I think almost everyone took the initial reaction as fact until we really started looking into it. I mean, we all did. We were all guilty of it. But once we started looking into it, let the facts speak for themselves, and let, the paperwork or lack thereof speak for itself. And moving forward. And what I'd say is, from what I've seen, no one's been busted for anything he's ever said or done. He's not in witness protection. He's still out there living his life. So, and again, I don't want to argue on his behalf, but it seems like those are pretty clear cut things.
Yes.
So that's where I'm kind of at with it.
Yeah. That's a big fact. So do you ever worry like of repercussions of them trying to come for you, basically?
When I left, like I said, at first I was in good standings. And even when I was put out bad, the message that went out was that, there's no beef or ill will. They essentially said Mooch has moved on with his life. It was actually really positive, which is kind of conflicting to that bad statement that went with it. Right. But, as far as I know, there's no general beef. I know they're on a no contact. So I would assume if I saw someone, we would just ignore each other. But as far as I know, there's no sort of beef or anything like that. The part, I guess, where it gets tricky is you spend as much time in the club as I do, and you've had different run-ins with different people in different clubs. Who's to say that that's any different with a patch or no patch? And on my end, I'm live and let live. I don't have any issues, but I'll defend myself. But what I'm saying is, I don't know who has beef with me from other clubs because of things I did when I was in the club. So that's never going to completely go away. But as time goes and space and everything kind of happens, I think things start to fizzle out. Well,
that's good. That's because that's a worrisome thing in life too. Like you're trying to move on with your life, do something else, getting degrees, writing books, doing YouTube, and you don't need the black cloud hanging over the top of your head every time you walk around.
Definitely. And I think just with human nature and the way things go, life's going so good that's something I get worried about, right? Is that something stupid from my past is going to come up and grab me when everything's, when I'm moving forward, just to suck me back. And hopefully that's not the case. But it's definitely a concern.
Oh, man. So is there any kind of message that you would want for the youngsters when it comes to maybe wanting to prospect for a club?
Yeah, man, I get messaged a lot on social media where people are pretty open and ask a lot of questions. And one of the ones I get the most is, would you recommend I prospect, or is joining a club for me? And only you can answer that. My recommendation would be spend as much time with that club as you can. Because honestly, what you see is what you get for the most part. People aren't acting entirely different behind closed doors as they are to your face. So, if you're really starting to get to know these guys, spending time on the road with them, partying with them, going to bars, you'll get a good idea of how they treat each other, how they treat their prospects, kind of the lifestyle they live. And if it jives with your lifestyle, if it's something that you guys have connected and shared interest, then why not, right? But also, like we were talking about before, you've got to know the risks and be willing to sign up to those risks. There's a lot of people that reach out to me and say, hey, I've got a wife and a kid and a good job. Should I join? Again, I can't answer that. There's a lot of clubs out there, probably almost all of them, where people either are married or have kids and full-time jobs. So, I've said this on a lot of my interviews, but I think the adage of joining the club is death or jail is kind of an old adage, right? You could definitely be a club member and live a successful and happy lifestyle. Now, the risks are higher for things to happen, like we've talked about, but there's still a lot of positives to it. And I still think if it's a good fit, it could be a good fit. Like I said, I don't regret the time I spent in club world. It made me who I am today. And, I'm really happy with it and the great connections I made. So it would be hard pressed for me to try and talk someone out of it. I would just say, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons.
It's a great answer right there, man. So when you were in the Vagos, went to the Mongols, did you have Vagos tattoos?
No, I had two. I had a little 22 on next to my eye, and then a winged wheel on the other side. Well, I had an MF on the other side, and I covered it with a winged wheel, and I've had those lasered off since then.
Okay. Yeah, that's another thing. Everybody wants to know about the tattoos. It's like the biggest question I find in my comments when I do any kind of interview or whatever you want to call it with a former motorcycle club member.
Well, what's kind of a trip is when I retired, I was allowed to keep, I was in good standing, so I was allowed to keep my tattoos. But I covered them up before I got switched to Out Bad. And I know that rubs some people the wrong way, but honestly, my stance on it was this: I don't want to represent myself as something I'm not. I don't want to live off of merits and laurels of other people. And even though it was a big part of my history and my past, the visible ones I wanted to cover up because that was no longer me. It was a chapter in my life that I was closing. So I do know that, some active members took it as disrespectful, and I hear them. I don't agree, but I hear it. I get it. But coming from my perspective, like I said, that was more of me closing a chapter and moving on, and not trying to represent something that I was no longer a part of.
Right. Well, not just that. It's almost like having a target. I know that you had a tattoo on the back of your head.
Yeah. The target thing, yes, but on top, not to sound like arrogant, but I think most people in the area know who I am either way. So I don't think the tattoo was all that important. The biggest thing with covering up the one on my head was employment, man. I'm working with kids and youth, and like I said, I work with kids on parole and probation, so I deal with a lot of juvenile probation department and stuff like that. And so, I go to these trainings and meet with these people on the law enforcement side, so to speak, judges and stuff like that. And I've got Mongols with the middle finger blasted on the back of my head. I covered up the middle finger part several years ago, but I ended up, I was one of the big things of covering up the Mongol part. And even when I was active in the Mongol toward the end, I was considering covering it up because it was really inhibiting my career. And obviously I knew that when I got it, but I was also a lot younger and in a way different place in my life when I got it too.
So did you prospect for the Mongols?
I didn't. No, I was patched over from the Vagos.
Wow. That's pretty big right there, right?
Well, yes and no. I think, like I said, Doc was kind of on this big recruitment drive. So a lot of people came in without prospecting. And even, like I said, I can't speak for other clubs except for one I've seen, but I think I don't want to say it's commonplace, but a lot of exceptions are made for people these days, whether, you're a charter member, you're helping start a new chapter, or, hey, you grew up with so-and-so, or, you know what I'm saying? There's different reasons, but I've seen it's not all too uncommon for people to not prospect. And like in the Mongols, if you don't prospect, you're a 1-year probationary member. So you're called a P patch or a probate. You're a probationary. So, there's different ways to come in, and you're still, putting in the work and helping out and helping with security and still kind of, making a name for yourself, just without the prospect patch.
So what's it like walking into bars these days without the colors on?
Man, you know what? So other than when I was like brand new and young, I don't think that's really ever defined me. One of the things I used to say in leadership is I didn't understand some of these other clubs in the area. So there's a lot of bars that say no patches allowed or no colors allowed. And then you find out why. And it's because a lot of these guys are going in there with their puffy chest saying, "Do you know who I am? Don't touch my patch." And I've never wanted to be that guy that wasn't welcome back places. One of the things I really liked is when I brought a chapter in somewhere and people go, "Shit, the Mongols are here," and they were scared. But when it was over, they'd say, "Man, those were the nicest guys ever. Don't mess with them, but they were great." And so, I think honestly it's about the same, just because that's the way I've carried myself before. I've never tried to, like I said, rest on the laurels or the merits of the patch or make the patch make me who I am. So honestly, without my patch, I think I'm the same guy as I was with it.
Have you ever thought about reaching out to somebody like, say, George Christie, to try and have him come onto your channel and you guys just talk?
Yeah, yeah, yes and no. I think it would be, there's a lot for me to wrestle with on that one, right? Just because the amount of time I was in and history between those two clubs. George is I respect what that guy's doing, and I've seen a lot of his stuff. We come from such a different generation. I don't know what we would have in common to talk about necessarily. But that's a tough one, man. I can't say I'm opposed to it, but we've talked, him and I have talked a little bit on social media, but we haven't like hung out or talked in person and stuff. And that's as far as it's gone so far. And it's been pretty simple as far as like advice about the book or, different podcast stuff. So,
Absolutely. Now he's opening up and doing his own podcast and all that. And obviously the book, everybody's enthralled with the lifestyle. So, you have 15 years in one club, 2 in another. That's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of memories.
For sure, man. I'm coming on 42 years old. So pretty much the majority of my adult life, I spent in motorcycle clubs. So it's definitely a huge part of my life.
Nice. Well, all right, brother. Oh man. So let me see. Let's see what everybody's talking about in the comments here. I've been kind of trying to hit with the comments. Like I said, with the Mongols, I didn't grow up really around many Mongols, right? Like like I said, they were in Henderson, but we never really saw them. I grew up when the Hells Angels were the big thing in Las Vegas. You see the things that are going on now, like with the Vagos Hells Angels in Las Vegas on the freeway, that incident,
Right.
or just these wars that are almost out in the open. And I mean, you can call it what you call it, but I mean, you're doing it in front of 1,000 people. How does that make you feel? Like,
that's a tough one because, if you're defending yourself, you're going to do what you got to do. As far as, instigating that thing, for lack of a better term, I think clubs are shooting themselves in the foot. Here we are. There's all these well-spoken dudes and NCOM and COC and anti-profiling project and all this stuff to prove that motorcycle clubs are not gang members. And then they're getting in very public shootouts. And so then it's very hard to argue that. So, I understand that sometimes it escalates to that. And once it does, it just is what it is. But I really wish it would stop happening as well. I mean, I think it gives the whole motorcycle community a bad name and clubs and everything in general, so it's kind of a step backwards when the culture is moving forward so much. Sons of Anarchy and all these different things have made our culture so mainstream that stuff like that kind of gives it a black eye. And I know probably the original 1%ers and the OGs say, who cares? That was the point anyways, right? We don't care what anybody thinks, but the newer generation does. And with an age of social media and, so many other things, obviously it's better to be, at least perceived, or I guess it's just better in general, just to be a good person and to be perceived as good than to be out there and be the bad guy.
Yeah. Who had better parties? Vagos or Mongols?
Man, I wasn't in the Vagos long enough to really say. I've been to maybe one really good Vago party, but I've been to a bunch of really good Mongol parties.
Yeah.
The Mongols have some pretty rad parties, and it got to a point where each chapter was trying to top, or each region was trying to top the other region, so things got pretty out of hand. So the Mongols definitely have some pretty rad parties for sure.
So, were you in Oregon when all of the Antifa stuff was going on, and they were doing?
Man,
I
wasn't. And what's funny about that is back when we were doing the anti-racist skinhead thing, Antifa was there, but we were too violent for them, right? Like they were so political and we weren't political enough. And to them, we were just as bad as the Nazis because, we were pretty indiscriminate. If someone had a certain symbol, we were going to beat them up. So, to them, we were on the same page and we were kind of shunned by them as well because it was such a political movement. So it's kind of funny now. I see some stuff in the comments sometimes or whatever when I say I was an anti-racist skinhead and people are like, "Oh, he's Antifa or this," and it's so far from the fact,
Right.
But no, that's a little different generation than me as well. I was out of Portland by then.
Because I had heard that there were some beefs, I think up in Washington mostly, between motorcycle clubs and Antifa.
I had read something between, I think it was Gypsy Jokers and Antifa, but all I know is what I saw on the internet, so I'm not sure. But I would imagine, right, like some of these really, really politicized far left wing, they'll trip on anything, right? And bikers are known for having, imagery of swastikas and SS bolts. And if you take it at face value, then that's going to start a conflict. And I've seen that stuff in Oregon for sure. The helmet with the swastika on it, and all of a sudden a bunch of Antifa people, grouping up and chanting this or that, or trying to blacklist barbershops and stuff like that because of it. So I've seen it happen. It's a different era than what I'm used to for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be crazy. It'd be crazy to see the clash between those two groups.
Right.
Because Antifa, I don't know. You look at it, it's like, a bunch of probably, just young kids that probably wouldn't stand up very well against the clubs.
Right.
And all of us were watching. I was just like, yeah, let it happen. Let it happen.
I think that was probably I bet most people were on that page.
So, yes, Mooch Herb Dizzle. Mooch does have his own channel. Can you plug your channel? And I will go find it real quick and I'll drop the link to it.
Yeah, it's called Mondays with Mooch. And essentially the point of I'm not doing stuff super often. So I'm just trying to kind of tell my story. And what I like to do is, sometimes it's me writing, sharing pictures and stuff from my past. But then I also like to try and get some guests on that were there for it too. So you're not just hearing my perspective of my story, you're hearing somebody else's. So like I did one with the singer of my band and we talked about touring and the band days. And then I recently did one about, how I was a Vago for a little bit. The next one I have coming out is within that first year of the Mongols, because like I said, that first year was pretty intense. So it's just me sharing clips of my story when I can. So I'm not super active on it. I try and do 1 or 2 a month. But then when I'm on other shows and stuff, I'd rather help promote the other show than my own. So then sometimes I go for a while without putting mine out too. So, but I definitely appreciate people checking it out, subscribing, leaving comments. And then my Instagram's OG__Mooch. And like we were saying before, I do my best to try and answer everybody on there, man. I mean, if you come and ask me some crazy shit, I'm probably not going to reply. But outside of that, man, if it's positive and people just want to shoot the shit or have questions about biker life, I'm more than happy to help out. So give me a follow on there as well, and hit me up if you got any questions.
It's got to be hard. You have all these stories, you have all these memories, but you can only talk about certain stuff.
Man, that's been the hardest part about the book so far. Not even like legally speaking, but just like I'm working with, I have a ghostwriter, a professional writer that's doing it for me. And so here we are, we're telling stories, or I'm writing stuff, and he's like, all right, that's enough, or hey, that's too much, or hey, we're going to lose the reader's interest if we just keep telling these stories. And so finding the balance of like what's shareable and what isn't, and that part's been a challenge, or just, I guess, a new experience in general. I'm always that guy that's been pretty well known. Like at the end of the parties, we're hanging out and I'm telling stories and, funny anecdotes and whatnot. And so like figuring out what fits into the book and what doesn't, or what can share publicly and what can't.
Right. Because that's a big deal right there, especially with all the RICO and this is and that's. I mean, at any time, somebody could just slip up, say the wrong thing, and it can cost a lot of people.
Yeah, no, definitely, for sure. And that's what, I mean, if you read some of the other biker books and stuff, people are pretty vague about certain stuff, or at least the smart ones are. Doc wasn't, and look how that worked out for him. So
that guy, he, whatever happened with him? He's obviously in witness protection. Yeah.
I would assume, I honestly am not sure. I know he got out a few years ago, but
I mean, he's a big dude, right?
Yeah.
Like, can't really miss him, but
yeah.
I mean, that's so strange. And then with little Dave, it just seems like, I think everybody's biggest, I can't even think of the word. Their biggest observation about the Mongols is the leadership, right?
And I think the leadership stuff's been very public. I think that the majority of big clubs that are structured the same, there's some that aren't, go through a lot of really similar things. And in fact, I know some of the other major clubs have gone through very similar things. What's different is the Mongol stuff is publicized for one reason or another. Doc drew a lot of attention on himself and, doing talk shows and books. And then, Dave had been on some media stuff. And then, I don't think this was intentional on his end, but the whole beef with him got really publicized. And then it became out in court. So it was in all sorts of mainstream media. And so I wouldn't say necessarily it's any different, like as far as like that type of drama and leadership issues, but I would say it's been more publicized for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just, it's like a black eye on the Mongols. Like that's what everybody who isn't a Mongol can look at the Mongols and say, oh, well, just look at their leadership for the last 40 years, or 30 years or whatnot. But I mean, it's got to be hard to be a Mongol and go through all of this and see all of this happening. And you have your friendships with certain people, and then they're out, and they're being called this or that. And you kept it with Dave, the friendship. Why hasn't he been on your YouTube yet?
Man, like I said, a lot of my YouTube is going to be based off of my story, and Dave's been all over the internet for a while, and I really think he's to the point right now where he's moving forward, he's staying healthy, and I want to keep rehashing old stuff. And I think it's almost better for like some time to pass so that when he does come back on, it's something new and positive instead of just continually, beating that same dead horse.
Yeah. So now after the club, are you doing any kind of jiu-jitsu tournaments or anything?
No, actually. So I moved out here to Illinois to join a tournament team in 2017. But in 2018, I got diagnosed with a rare degenerative disease, and I had to have my whole cervical spine fused. So I have C3 through T1 all fused, like big rods in my whole neck. So I can't compete anymore. They said I shouldn't train anymore, but I still train. Initially they said no more competing, no more riding, and I still do it all. I just last year I rode from Illinois to Oregon and back. I still train 3 or 4 days a week and then lift weights and stuff like that, but I can't compete anymore. I can't risk like getting thrown weird or someone pulling on my head too hard or something and breaking the fusion.
Right. I mean, have you been in everybody who's ridden a motorcycle for as long as you have? You ever had to lay the
Man,
bike down?
knock on wood, not for a long time. But early on, learning how to ride or riding on different type of pavement or gravel, and plus I think any one of us, if you get in the bagger scene or bigger bikes, there's times where it's just a heavy bike, and sometimes you're at the wrong angle and it falls over. But thankfully, no, I've been pretty lucky that I've been pretty blessed with my riding stuff. I ride a lot, and I've been pretty lucky that a lot of times it's not even the rider's fault. So like that's why I say I've been pretty lucky.
Do you go to any runs anymore? Like,
Yeah, so like Lift Train Ride last year, linked up with a group called Club Style Illinois, and we put on an event at the Harley dealership. I still go to like local events and rides. Even as an active like 1%er, I never really enjoyed like I like the side parties in Daytona, but I didn't care for Daytona. I've never been to Sturgis because I don't like those big crowds and that type of scene. So honestly, I don't think it's changed much for me about what I go to and how active I am. I'm still pretty active. I ride a lot and try to support a lot of things.
that's good. That's good. Well, all right, brother. I think I've taken enough of your time up here.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and for anyone that was watching and shout out questions, thank you guys very much.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you so much for coming on, and we'll be watching to see what you got going on.
All right, man. Well, shoot me the link and when you're going to put this on YouTube again, and I'll help share it.
Okay, absolutely, brother. It'll be probably a day or two. I'm doing Renaissance Festival tomorrow, so.
Okay, cool. We'll have fun there.
Family stuff.
All right.
All right, everybody. Thanks for coming by, meeting Mooch, and we'll see you guys on the next go around. Kind of tired tonight. Time to go night, man.
All right. Well, I'll see you guys. Thanks again, man.
All right.